guys, it's Peanut Butter Ice Cream Bar, and it's time for another character video. So last time we were discussing Citrus's shame, the shed. Today, we're going to discuss Citrus's guilt. Yay! It's been a real happy past two videos. As with the last video, this video is going to have some horror-y, yucky kind of elements, so be forewarned that they are there. So to talk about this, we kind of have to take a quick detour and talk about Citrus's reproduction. I've called it budding in the past, but let me say what that actually means for Citrus. I've always thought of Citrus as a micro creature on a macro scale, which is how he ended up reproducing by budding in the first place. But of course, this is a little bit sci-fi, and it's also a little bit fantasy, so it gets a little crazy. So anyway, this is how Citrus works. His body can either go through a transformation process from micro to macro scale, in which he creates a body that allows him to interact with and adapt to his current environment. Let's call that Citrus macro Citrus. Or he can transform into a hibernation state, a microscopic creature that can survive almost any environment but cannot interact with it. That is micro Citrus. Or he can go anywhere in between to restart his transformation process. However, he's only able to reproduce once he is macro Citrus. He can't reproduce in the micro scale. Once he reaches maturity, his mature body will then begin to bud about once a year and go through a process that takes about 2 months, which is basically his kind of asexual pregnancy. During this process, his body begins to split. His face starts growing another face, his legs start to split into more legs. It's really kind of gross, but hey, when is birth not kind of really gross? Let's be real. At least kind of. Once the bud has reached maturity, it splits from Citrus and becomes a child clone, the original Citrus being the parent clone. Since reproduction is asexual and produced only when in macro scale, all Citrus's offspring are actually more like clones of himself. In fact, they are exactly like clones of himself, rather than actual children. The child clone is then independent. It can even choose to go back and go toward a micro state to try and transform its body again. It's totally independent, but it can always be called back by a sort of hive mind by its parent clone. Generally, the parent clone will only call back the children in this way when it is close to dying. A child clone will instinctively eat a parent clone, supposedly gaining its memories and resources and all that good stuff. Remember that even though this is gross, it's actually just Citrus splitting himself up and then reforming himself over and over and over again. His life is not one straight line, it's a disgusting cyclical adventure. Now that you know all this, we can talk about Citrus's guilt. The children. So Citrus might not always be happy, happy, joy, joy, but he does legitimately love the place that he has come to live in. He doesn't remember what his purpose is supposed to be on this planet, but he does know that he could, given time, overwhelm the planet with clones of himself, even pushing other species to extinction, including his friends. Sorry, friends! I out-evolved you. Fearing this, he decides to take matters into his own hands. After all, he can't stop what his body does naturally, but he can take some sort of drastic measures. Namely being that when he does start to bud, he will wait for the child clone to reach a certain level of maturity, and then cut it off him in a way that won't leave lasting scars. That sounds like it definitely would, but remember, during the budding process, he is growing limbs out of his limbs. His body is very good at healing. Now, the child clone, once cut off, will quickly die. It doesn't have the ability to transform unless it's carried to term by Citrus. He can choose to then bury the clone, or in the form of his people, he can choose to eat the clone, but the problem is basically solved, sort of, but not at all. Because now we're getting into this level of his psychology where he's basically saying to himself, I am bad. To protect the place and the people I love, I need to murder myself. Happy! I mean, that is basically what he believes is the right thing to do, and that's basically what the thought is, and that is very troubling. It's also not even correct. I mean, he really has no proof that he is the horrible monster that he seems to think that he is, probably fed by his memories of the shed, but the other issue is that he's denying himself a natural part of his life cycle. He's trying to freeze time for himself to stop aging, and that's definitely not healthy, especially when you already have kind of a fragile psyche. So that's the basis of his guilt. But there's one more layer to this that just puts a cherry right on top. My poor baby. This is what I like to call his pregnancy cravings. When he goes through the budding process, he starts to get cravings, and these cravings are mostly for things that he ate while he was doing his original transformation from micro to macro. I don't know why. I guess because his body thinks that those are the things that helped him build that body, so then he's craving as he's trying to build another body. Whatever it is, he gets cravings, and it's pretty weird to have cravings for things like rusty cans and glass and humans. He does occasionally get the urge to chew on and digest the very people that he is trying to protect, so that's great. It all comes down to the idea that Citrus believes he's a threat without any real proof that he is that. He's never eaten a living person. He's not overwhelming the world with clones of himself, but he believes he's capable of these things. And because he believes that, he feels such overwhelming guilt. So much so that he's forced himself into this corner of, it's not real, it's not real, I'm happy all the time, I'm great. That's not to say that he isn't usually happy. It's in his nature to be in a good mood, almost all the time. But there is something under his natural happiness. There is, you know, a past. He's not just a bubbly little guy. He's a bubbly little guy, but also is super afraid of feeling negative emotions that remind him of these two, one in the past, one slightly more ongoing events that he can't really face. So I think that's enough for today. Next time I talk about Citrus, it might be in relation to another character. I'm not totally sure yet. Or I might continue doing more character videos with more of my characters, talking about the bus that just arrived. Hello? Hello, bus. So I hope you guys enjoyed watching this. I hope you've enjoyed hearing about Citrus so far, and I certainly hope you'll enjoy hearing about my other characters as well. Thank you so much for watching. Bye!